You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. Be sure to go to youtube.com/Chris Voss and hit that bell notification so you can see all the wonderful videos we do of all the brilliant authors and, of course, product reviews we do as well, and technology, et cetera, et cetera. youtube.com/Chris Voss. And make sure you subscribe, share that video out. You get to see the wonderful video that we're having today with the brilliant author of multiple books. The other thing that you should do is go to goodreads.com. Follow me over there. It's goodreads.com/Chris Voss. We've got a group we're building up there for a book club. Also, we have a Facebook book club as well. If you want to join me over there, you can just go to Facebook.com/Chris Voss. Send me a message and I'll invite you. Also, refer your friends, neighbors, relatives, dogs, cats. Get everyone in on the show, thecvpn.com or chrisvosspodcastnetwork.com. Today, our brilliant author, because we always have brilliant authors. I can't think of one day that we have not had a brilliant author on. But the brilliant author we have on today is Heather Lende. She is the author of Bears and Ballots, an Alaskan adventure in small town politics. And she's written a number of different books from what I understand. We'll get into that here in a second. But she's written many essays and stories, mostly about life and sometimes death in Haines, Alaska. They've been widely distributed from the Anchorage Daily News, Christian Science Monitor to NPR and Country Living. She's a former contributing writer at Women's Day magazine, and for over 20 years has written some 500 obituaries for the Chilkat Valley News in Haines, I believe that's the title. She's the author of best-selling memoirs, Find the Good, If You Lived Here, I Know Your Name, and Take Good Care of the Garden and Dogs. Welcome to the show, Heather. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Chris. This is really fun to be here with you.
Thank you. It's fun. Did you take the time to come here? I'm looking at the bio on your website, and you've got some cute golden retrievers. Is that what those are?
Yeah, they're sometimes cute, and sometimes they're wet, and they roll in fish, and they're not so endearing. But yes,
oh,
I have
boy.
2 golden retrievers.
I've never had the fish smell. I've had the rolling and poop smell on with my 2 Siberians and everything else, the wet dog thing. But yeah, fish. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, salmon. They spawn and die, and so that can be challenging.
I had the skunk once too. That's always a fun 2 weeks. Really.
Well, the real fun one is bear poop.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't even talk to me about it.
Note to self, never get bear poop anywhere. No. Speaking of bears, let's talk about your book. You've written this wonderful book. Give us your plugs where people can find you on the interwebs first.
I'm really easy to find. It's just heatherlende.com. If you just Google my name, I have a website and I blog and there's pictures and it's kind of chatty about, life in Haines. So, and the books are found anywhere books are sold and most libraries too.
Check out your local bookstores and, wherever you want to take and buy the book. Of course, you can get it at the big vendors. Heather, what motivated you want to write this book?
Well, the book is about my 3-year term on the Haines Borough Assembly. And Haines is a small town in Alaska, and we're called a borough. I don't know why. It's like New York City or whatever, but Alaska has boroughs the way other places have counties. And actually, in very small places like Haines, the borough and the city or whatever is just the same thing. So it's just, think of it as your local city council, but it's the borough government. And I ran in 2016, the same year that Trump was elected, and served for 3 years until 2019. And I didn't at first plan on writing about it at all, but because I just sort of write about what happens in Haines and life here, I found it to be pretty interesting and inspiring and challenging. And I thought that my time in local government here both illuminates, what life is like in a small town and what government actually does, and the people like me who are just amateurs doing the best we can. And also it started to reflect some of the issues that we saw nationally, the divisions and some of that stuff that was going on, and especially when it took sort of a nasty turn, and we recovered from it, but it was a boom, boom. I thought, well, maybe there is a story here, and maybe it could be helpful for anybody to know a little bit more about both what local government does, what life in a small town is like, but also how we treat each other and our elected officials, and what's the better way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And is it also a journey of like where someone like someone who wants to get into politics just to help out the local community on a local scale? I mean, I don't know, maybe you had a grand vision of becoming president someday.
No.
There's still time. But you know, I think it kind of shows what that journey is like is for some people in, you know, just trying to help out the community and then finding maybe the toxicity and stuff like that.
Yes, and I think too, you know, I bumbled into stuff. I went in very idealistically and thought, you know, I was going to save the world and everybody would be very happy about all my decisions, and that quickly went south. And I learned a lot, and so I thought I would share, you know, what I learned about participating in local government, about how to do that, about the importance of it. And so there's, you know, the stories are all mixed up with family and community, and then some practical things about how to govern, like simply learning Robert's Rules of Order and how to conduct yourself in a public meeting. So I don't know. I think I'm pleased that it actually inspired some people to run for office in our local election. A young woman who was 32, a clerk at the liquor store. She just ran and won a seat on the assembly. And
there you go.
Yeah, and then a younger guy who also co-owns his family's grocery store. He's now the new mayor.
Wow.
So I felt like, you know, I as much as there was some really harrowing times for me emotionally, I apparently didn't scare off too many people, and people are excited about running for office in Haines and hopefully running for office wherever you live.
What's the population of Haines, Alaska?
It's officially it's 2,500, but that's a little bit. That makes us sound bigger than we are because of our isolation. We're a ferry ride or a small plane flight from Juneau, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So it's about a 4.5-hour ferry trip, 45-minute flight. And we have a road that goes out into the interior of Alaska, but you hit the Canadian border 40 miles out of town. It's British Columbia, then the Yukon, and huge wilderness area. And you end up in Haines Junction, which has 600 people. And if you keep going for another couple hours, you end up in Whitehorse. It is a bigger city of about 20,000. But the border's been closed now since March, and no sign of when it's going to open again. But it's so the town everything's contained. Like you can't drive to Target, or there's no outside of town. There's no movie theaters. There's no chain stores. Everything is we have 3 grocery stores. They're local. My family owns a hardware store and a lumber yard. The newspaper is a local paper. The radio station is a local public affiliate of the Alaska Public Broadcasting Network. The school, we have one school, K through 12, and there's about 275 kids that attend school, including 4 of my grandchildren. Mm-hmm. It's very active politically. Everybody's involved on committees or organizations or nonprofits, from the library and the swim team to Sportsmen's Association and volunteer EMTs. And it's also probably, I think, the most beautiful place in the world.
There you go.
Big
Alaska is beautiful.
And fjords, and it's a relatively poor community. We don't have a whole, there's fishermen, working people, merchants, some people work for the state, federal government. Those are good jobs here. Free lunch program for the kids at school, that kind of thing. People, make do here, and the economy is always an issue. And then, you said, I think you said you were in Utah or Las Vegas. You know how the West is. It's many of the issues hinge on resource development or protection, or that's our big discussions, or our arguments tend to focus right along those lines: logging and mining and what happens and what's the values of our community and how many jobs do we need. That's a pretty much a perennial argument here.
There you go. So you talk in the arc of the book about how you take on this journey, this idealistic sort of thing where I'm going to run for office and give a crap about what's going on in my community and try and improve it. And I think a lot of people do that with good intentions, even if it's like the HOA board, which are a bunch of morons. Excuse me. I'm sure they're different in your community.
We don't have an HOA board here.
You're very lucky. I come from Vegas where everything is HOA.
No, we don't even have any homeowners associations. We don't know what those are. Our whole town is basically gated.
You want to write another great book on malignant narcissism and all sorts of stuff? Move to Vegas and get an HOA, which is anywhere you live, and then you'll meet some really interesting people, and you'll have volumes. Anyway. So in the book, you talk about the arc of you go through this, you run for office, you win office, and how long are you in office for?
3 years.
Mm-hmm. And then there's actually somewhere in there that they try and remove you from office.
Yes,
some of the competitors
right away, pretty much.
Really?
The story was I think there was 6 of us running for 2 seats, and the way our local assembly works is that just the top 2 vote getters get the seats. There's not precincts or anything. So 6 people threw their hat in the ring, and the 2 with the most votes won. And that was myself and the editor of the local newspaper, Tom Morford. And so, right away, we're more liberal, and the people whose candidates lost, and some of the candidates that lost, got really angry. And they said, we're going to recall you. We're getting you out of here. The wrong people voted. Big trouble. And it all also, hinged then, of course, on the national election with Trump and Hillary, and how did the rest of the country get it right? Haynes got it wrong. We went the wrong way, and people were pretty angry. And there was a bunch of decisions that were made within the first month I was on the assembly. One concerned a harbor vote, another one that was the manager was fired. And all of a sudden by Christmas, the recall was starting. And so I barely got on the assembly before 3 of us were being challenged and called misconduct and all kinds of terrible things that we had done. And that process lasted almost 9 months. It kind of dragged out because you had 30 days for this filing and 60 for that. And it was like the whole time we were governing then, every time anybody disagreed with the decision you made, well, then they could sign the recall petition. So it just kind of went like that.
So you just kind of keep adding votes as you go.
Yeah, I mean, you do.
That's what's going on right now.
Well, there goes another signature.
You're sitting at the committee meetings, and the people that come up to the mic are yelling at you. You're like,
and they would say that. They'd say, okay, we're going to recall you now. And I'd be like, and they'd say, if you don't do that, I'm recall. Oh, no. And then, and I say it's funny now. It wasn't funny when I was involved.
Sure.
It really sort of cut me to the quick. Because as you mentioned, I've written a lot of obituaries. I'm involved in the community in a lot of ways. I have 5 children that we've raised here. We have business, library board, hospice, those kind of things that I do. And I just thought that goodwill would carry the day. And also, I write about life here, and my other books really, in many ways, were all love letters to the community of, this wonderful small town and the perfect rural, not perfect, but, pretty darn good, and this one really sort of shook me. But I came out on the other side. Thankfully, the recall didn't happen, and got more votes in the second election than I did in the first. But more importantly, it wasn't just about me. The town rejected that argument.
Because they didn't go through them.
No, and the 2 other guys, that Tom and then an artist, of course, a local artist, were also up for recall, and it basically even 60-40. The town just said no, that we didn't agree with the way to do that. And then, of course, you had to couldn't just quit. Then you had to suck it up and go 2 more years, with these same people in the front row going, I think we need another recall petition, and you're like, But,
wow.
I had to learn a lot.
It's interesting about the book because it's a microcosm of what's going on nationally, is what you write about, and the toxicity in politics. Was it always this way in that little town, or did a lot of this get set off by the divisive man that seems to have won or stolen an election in 2016?
Well, you know, I was in the swimming pool. I swim early in the morning. We have a community pool indoors, of course. It's Alaska, and there's the early bird swimmers at like 6 o'clock, and there's one of my favorite swimmers is Joni Schneider, and she's a retired public health nurse, and she's like, I think she just turned 91, and she's always at the pool in the mornings. And when I told her, you know, after I got on the assembly and we were talking, I said, Joni, I don't know, how did I ever get myself in this situation? She said, Heather, you wrote about it in your first book. You said way back, and if you lived here, that 50% of the people in Haines are happy 50% of the time, and that's, you're never going to please everybody here. You ought to know better. And I was like, oh, Joni, you're right. She said, this has been like this forever around here. And I guess I hadn't thought about that, but I think the way where Haines is and probably other small towns too, but where there's hope is that even though we might have had these pretty kind of nasty disagreements that happened on Facebook or social media, like you see now, or people saying stuff that isn't true and mean to each other on all sides. You know, it goes, when people get mad, they really get mad. My favorite part of the book is the little breaks in between each chapter that list what we've actually done, the manager and the committee reports, you know, and yeah, like I love these because in the midst of all the turmoil, it sort of lets people know like what we were actually doing. Like the harbor staff reports that after beaching the Letnikov Cove harbor float, they discovered some damage, but it should be repairable. The finance department reports that tax statements are at the printers and should be distributed next week. The construction at the wastewater treatment plant is ahead of schedule. And, you know, or even one of my favorites is there's an ongoing discussion of an outhouse at Mosquito Lake that takes up, it's probably on every meeting that we had. And even after 3 years, we never did get that outhouse built. over the discussions of maintenance. Who was going to maintain the outhouse? So that's what it all hinged on. And we didn't have a plan for who was going to keep it clean.
Well, I think what's interesting about your book, and I think you talk about this a little bit, or at least we get the concept of it, is that people always want stuff from their government. Like they want the roads cleaned, they want the road, they want the schools, they want stuff. But there seems to be more and more, and I talked to people who lived back in the Nixon era. And in the Nixon era, most everyone knew their senators. They knew the names of their senators, which is really weird today because I don't think hardly anybody can name their senators unless you're really into politics like I am. And they knew what was going on in their government. But it seems like today, and politics has become, you know, I think a lot of politicians that don't want a lot of people in politics except for people of power, they've tried to discourage people and be toxic as they can to drive people from the process because they can retain power if they can keep most people involved out. You know, if no one's looking over your shoulder, you can do a lot of fun stuff with yourself and your cronies. But it seems like a lot of people these days, they want all this stuff. Like, you know, I even argue with people about rule of law and why it's important. And they're just like, well, screw it. Let rule of law do whatever you want. And you're like, okay, well, I'll come into your house and just take everything. Is that cool with you? And they're like, no. And you're like, you don't understand how this really works. Did you find that in your experience with government, or is that one of the issues?
It was even an issue with some of the other people that had, you know, served on the assembly, where they'd say things like, you know, they were against, you know, government, and they didn't want the government to be involved in this and that. And then I remember saying to one of the women, I said, well, we are the government. I'm like, you might be, but I'm not. And it's like, no, this is what we are. I mean, the borough assembly is the representative. We're the people who are governing the town. And it's not a bad thing. Like you say, I mean, government is police, it's clean, it's water that it's safe to drink, it's, you know, toilets that flush, the library is open on, you know, when you go there, the door is open when you drive in a snowstorm to go, you know, bring your kids to the library. There's not a sign on the door that says, oh, didn't feel like opening today. That's all government. And There's some people that get that, but I think when you're watching too much national news or listening to it or being on, in social media groups, you start to think it's all no good. And without it, we can't really function. I mean, John Adams, we're a nation of laws.
Yeah.
We agree to those laws and we can change them if they're not working for you, but that's the structure. And yeah, I mean, we have it's interesting that you say people don't know your senators. I mean, in Alaska, we call our senator Lisa. And everybody, even in Haines, expects that she would know you if you called her up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether she does or not, but she pretends she does. And when she comes to town a couple of times a year, greets everybody the same, not just the bigwigs or the monkey mucks. And even Dan Sullivan is a relatively new senator, but even the guy running against him, Al Gross, everybody knows Al too. Dan, we're pretty engaged as a state, but also as a community, and we expect a lot of our.
Yeah. And you talk about in the book, you kind of get some blowback on social media where you're blocked from a group or I think it's a group or a page that's attacking you, and you can't see it respond.
No, you can't. It was called Haines Rant and Rave, and the page was managed by one of the people who had lost the election to Tom and I. And there was just a lot there, and hard things. I couldn't see it, so I didn't know what they were saying. But you'd get friends that would send you a screenshot. I think when politics gets personal, it gets personal really fast. And so, like on Rant and Rave, there was a call to boycott our lumberyard, which it's a small town. We can't afford not going to the lumberyard because they didn't like the decision that I made on, I don't know, funding the police department or something. And so, there wasn't any way to openly fight that because you didn't know what they were saying.
Wow.
And
did you are you guys the only lumberyard in town?
No, there's two.
Oh, there's two. Okay. All right. Well, that would be funny if there was just one and you're like, boycott the lumberyard, and you're like, wait. Well,
yeah, there was other funnier. I mean, there's ironic moments all the way through, because
I'm sure.
And that, I think that gives me hope, though. I mean, at the same time, for instance, when one of the Rant and Rave people were particularly going after another assemblywoman, a friend of mine, on the page, and they were really, really going head to head. In fact, she quit the assembly over it. It hurt her feelings so much. Well, when her husband was out of town and there was a blizzard, she had to go down to the harbor to shovel off their commercial fishing boat. That's what they do for a living. And the guy who had been targeting her in all those nasty posts had shoveled the boat off for her because he's a fisherman. He was down there and he saw it, and so he thought, well, gee. And so, to me, that's a good sign that we're not really who we are on social media. Like, we get all caught up and we say this stuff, but we're still decent human beings when it comes right down to it. The guy's in the harbor. He knew John was away. Well, I'm here anyway with the shovel. I'll just do his boat because it's next to mine and on the other slip.
That's the question that I had for you. I mean, you're in this small town. I mean, in Washington or national politics, the likelihood of, if Ted Cruz says some crap about XYZ guy or whatever, pick your name, the likelihood of those two bumping into each other, unless maybe they're in the Senate and they cross in the hall, is pretty far-fetched. Or like me, I'm pretty sure I'm not bumping into Donald Trump for all the ugly things I've said to him on Twitter. I'm pretty sure him and I aren't going to be like passing each other in the aisle 14 at the local store. But you're in a small town, and what was it like maybe to come across people maybe at the store or the post office or wherever?
It's hard. I at one point, during the height of the recall stuff, I didn't even want to leave my house. I felt ashamed. Wow. You go to the grocery store and you're looking at a clerk that you've just seen something horrible they'd written about you on Facebook or had written a letter to the editor and signed it, and then they're like, "Hi, how are you today?" And I'm like, "Oh, great." I mean, do you think I don't know what you're saying? But you know,
Grounding.
that is really like, it was really a challenge for me. But it also, you know, this is something for me because I write about life in Haines and real people, and I have for 20 years. And it's like you said at the beginning, things have gone out, you know, far and wide. Even though a lot of those places where I've told stories from our community about real people aren't outlets that anybody here would even read or listen to or necessarily know, unless, you know, they're my family and like, hey, Mom, or, you know, look, you're in whatever, Women's Day. I always assume, and I think maybe this is because of life in a small town, that everybody that I write about or everybody that I talk about will read or hear or see what I say. And that guides my private life and public life. It's and so I think if we all did that, we might have a much more civil discourse, because assuming that somebody isn't going to see you on the street, or assuming that they don't know who your kids are or where your spouse works or whatever, where I just assume they all do. Maybe I'm egocentric, but I assume that everybody does. And because of that, I don't want to say anything, not that I'll say stuff that has to be said, but I don't want to do it in such a way that is just a rant and a shout and doesn't really contribute to fixing the problem or to calling somebody out in a proper way.
Yeah. That's more productive too when you really think about it. I mean, that's the policy that I have. In fact, my policy is I tag whoever's in it that I'm talking crap about, because I want them to know. And I'd love to hear their response too, because then I get more to crack on. But that's just me. You know what I would do if I would have been you? I would have like taken all the nasty posts, especially the people you're going to bump into in public, and I made a shirt or like a coat of all of the copies of the posts. And I'd be like, hey, you're right there.
You know, they do that at the newspaper office. There's like the wall of shame, they call it. They have all the little quotes from different people that have said different things at different times that are local officials, you know, these signs. And they put them all up. And you sometimes if you walk in this, and they're kind of on the cupboard doors by where the coffee pot is and all the old cookies and stuff. And so people come into the office, they don't necessarily see it, but if they turn around and start wandering, they might find their name up there saying something really silly. But one
of the things that really discouraged me about about politics and everything else was early on in 2016, I saw a lot of my friends in the deplorables group. I had a lot of friends that I thought were, you know, they're all kumbaya during Obama. We're solving racism and helping out, and we're fine with Obama. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're like, they came out of the racist closet and were like, yeah. And they were posting just the most heinous things, especially about Michelle Obama, and different Photoshops and just real ugly stuff. And I remember I don't remember, it's still happening. But one of the things that your book displays is how maybe we shouldn't be attacking personally people, like what they look like, or their race or their gender, or, you know, creating these weird things like this person is an alien. And we really should maybe just focus on the politics of the thing or the argument of what we're trying to do, instead of getting in all this fringe crap and attacking each other personally. Is that a concept maybe?
Oh, completely. You know, in Haines, it comes down to calling people, you know, hippies or rednecks, or assuming something about somebody's values just based on, I don't know, the hat they're wearing or the truck they're driving or whatever, where they, you know, what books they like to read. And it's easy to fall into that kind of anywhere. But at the same time, if you try to, I mean, it might be kind of Pollyanna to say, but I still believe it. You know, if you try to find what that person is good at, what they're concerned about, I think a lot of times we're all concerned about the same things. You know, I mean, everybody wants their family to be healthy. We all want enough to eat. We want some security financially and healthcare that we know, like if we go to the emergency room, we're not going to have to sell our house. It's not. We want clean air,
Clean water.
We don't want to be shot in bed. There's those things, and so the people that are angry on all sides, it's almost like, well, can we just like stop all this like blame and figure out what is going on and how we can fix it? And the problem is that if we call each other names and we say really awful things, it's just so hard to go back then and to sit down at a table with somebody who's posted awful racist things. And I mean, I don't even know where to begin there. But so it seems that the trick is to keep relationships, if you can, and keep trying to make it better. This isn't in the book, but I was thinking the other day, there was a woman who was married to an Episcopal priest well known in the state of Alaska, and Mildred Besser was her name, and her daughter was a self-identifying lesbian a long time ago, relatively, and Mildred was this minister's wife, just darling little woman, super sweet, and she just advocated for those kind of rights, the LGBTQ, all of it, for her whole life. And people said horrible things to her. I mean, wow. Sitting in the Alaska legislature, people would say things about her daughter and her daughter's friends that were just ick, but Mildred just never gave up. And this is a true story. When she was Mildred on her deathbed is when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of gay marriage. And they were literally watching the thing, wow. The TV, and they said, Mildred, we can get married now. And, they told her mother that. And she said, oh, good. And she died. She was like 90. But I think of her, because I don't know. And there's lots of people like that in the civil rights movement. How do you just keep, banging your head against some of these things and not just get so angry that you take yourself out of the game?
Yeah.
But there's people that can do it, and they're saints.
Yeah. And I think that's what's good about your book. It gives a good expose of what this is like, what people can expect when they go into government. And maybe it's a reason why people should change it so that they don't have the same experience you did in the book. And the conversation, to me, even now I'm bad. I think today I was posting about the fly on Pence's head and, all this stuff and making jokes about it. Funny, though. Yeah, it is funny.
I just wanted Kamala to just, do like what women do, kind of be going like this,
Yeah.
Trying to, when someone has food in their teeth, we try to just politely. I thought that would have been something, and have her gesturing. I would have liked to see that from her.
I thought it was really funny. The Biden campaign is selling fly swatters now, so there you go. Yeah. We really need to get back to topics. I think this is one of the reasons that politicians have really risen to power on dividing everybody. And then of course we have these conspiracy theories now. So we've kind of gone from talking about the facts, arguing facts and details, arguing what the truth is of the matter, to arguing about how, well, you're one of these people, or you're this, or you're an alien from another planet, or lizard people, in government, like you see on the on the rags on the newsstands. To where now we've taken it to like a whole new level of conspiracy, and social media has helped fuel this, where, now it's the QAnon and you're part of this Illuminati, whatever. And I mean, we're really off the rails when it comes to back to the facts and arguments. What do you think about that? Am I correct? Or
well, I think what happens is people dig into their group, and then they're in an echo chamber, and then it's like loyalty at all costs because the other side has been so demonized. And it's really hard when you're even in local government, when there's a group of people that you knew were your supporters, and they all weigh in on something that you actually disagree with, and suddenly they're more furious with you than the other side was mad at you. It's like, I think the art of government is really one of compromise. And if the electorate doesn't allow the people they vote for to compromise and says, we're going to recall you if you do, or get you the heck out of there, or we're going to be, with friends like that, who needs enemies? And we've done that to ourselves. And I don't know, I'm not sure how we can get out of it, except with maybe there's hope if Biden is elected and he generally is, nice to people who didn't vote for him or who are Republicans, or, because I even know as myself, I'm a registered Democrat. And when you talk about the Facebook stuff, there was a guy I know, I like him a lot, Joseph. I see him, he rides his bike around town, we're all friends, we all chat, and he posted this horrible thing on like the Hanes Chatters, the community page about, what's happening in town today, that like how, Democrats are all evil, go F yourself, never, got to get rid of them all. And I usually don't respond to those things, but I just went, I said, Joseph, I thought we were friends. And he's like, we are, exclamation point. I'm like, well, I'm a Democrat. And he's like, oh, I don't care about you. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about them, And I'm like, well, when you say things like that, and it just makes people go like, what? And so I don't know. I think a lot of it goes towards starting at the smaller problems and not the big national issues, and seeing, getting on a committee to, I don't know, to turn a vacant lot into a park, or figure out a better way to feed kids after school, or, something that doesn't have the left and right politics, but is more like a neighborhood thing. I know you were talking about homeowners associations, and I'm not all that familiar with them, but it seems like no matter what your politics, you could agree on a Christmas food drive for the poor or something.
Yeah.
But then you get to know somebody and you're not vilifying each other. What we have in Hanes, one of the things that's nice, like what I like, is I'm a volunteer for Hospice of Hanes, and where we don't have a lot of people that are dying at home, because we don't have a lot of people, but maybe one or two official hospice clients a year. But mostly we take care of elderly people who need help staying at home, and they might not have family here or whatever. And, you get their mail for them, or go to the grocery store, take a walk, or go to the pool, or whatever it is, do the dishes, go to church, different things like that. And it's always a great way to bridge those divides, because our, for lack of a better term, our hippie redneck thing, well, you have a hippie who's taking care of a redneck, and they just love each other. And they learn it's not about what their preconceived ideas was, but they're just, the human connection is really strong one. And I think if you keep making those, that's the way to do it. It's not policy. It's not a big proclamation. It's not even one person. It's on an individual basis. Make sure you're cross-pollinating.
And this is what I think is great about your book. It shows the arc of all this. And it's just a microcosm of what goes on nationally. But you can really kind of see the story on a very relative level of seeing, okay, well, wow, okay, this is really an issue. Let me ask you this. Does it come out of laziness where, I meet a lot of people and they say a lot of stuff, and I'll be like, where did you read that? And I'm like, I don't know, there's some guy spouting it. So I decided on social media, so I decided the Trump is spouting it, so I'm going to just repeat it. And you're like, well, have you ever checked the facts on that? You ever looked it up on Snopes? You ever look whatever? And I've got some friends now that I've trained to do this so well that if I give them some sort of data or information, they go, where'd you get that, Chris? And I go, okay, from WAPO. And you're like, well, where's the link? We got to read it. And that's good, though. I want them to challenge me. But it almost seems like it's laziness. And I didn't live in the 70s, so I can't validate that people knew their senators. I hear that a lot. And I hear a lot about how people were just more involved and they understood some of the concepts you talk about in the book. Do you think it's more about laziness? And then also maybe people have just become so programmed to not care about politics because they think it's mostly toxic, and their leaders are just pushing them around like chess pieces?
I think a lot of it, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's laziness. It's almost the opposite. People are so busy and they're just trying to get by, everybody's working, or they've got kids, or they've got parents, or they've got siblings, or they've got, there's just stuff to do. And we're more and more alienated. We're in our car or devices we're not one-on-one with people. And when we do, we're busy. Like, oh, I can't talk right now. I got to do this. And I think that's a part of it. And then part of it is the way government hasn't really responded to that busyness. I mean, if you even look at, well, they say, why did 50% only, 50% of people voting would be huge, right?
Yeah.
And yet we don't even have that. And why? Well, election day is Tuesday. Okay. I mean, even all this stuff about how to get an absentee ballot and do that, it's complicated. And you got to go online. And what if your internet's down or your kids are calling and I'm not excusing that so much, but I just don't think government has made itself accessible. Mm-hmm. And even you look at the national government, I mean, those people don't look like us. They don't even look like America. They're in limousines and they're ties and dresses and face work and they all have aides and people carrying their bags around and shopping for them. And it's like it's almost like the royal family or something. We're not like that. And so to get through to them, you try to email and there's, how many people do you have to get through to just get to your representative? And what do you get when you're all done with it? You get this email that just says what you could have read in the paper anyway. It doesn't, dear constituent, thank you for reaching out to me. This is my position on this. And there's 10 pages and, so what?
I think you nailed it on the head, because I've been watching the de-evolution of the middle class, moving it into the lower class since the 80s. And there's a lot of documentation on and books on a lot of this stuff, some of we talked about on the show. But I think people are just pushed to the point where they can only handle so much. They've got so much on their plate. I always remember that if you remember the movie Network, I think it was in the 70s.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah. And there's this thing that it just always rings in my head whenever we discuss stuff like this, where he goes, look, man, at the end of the day, I come home tired. I just want my radial tires. I want my TV. I want you to leave me alone and just let me have some peace for 5 freaking minutes, man. And I think you nailed it on the head. I think that's the way a lot of people feel. But sadly, things aren't going to get better that way. And certainly they haven't gotten better by us, going, I'm not going to be involved in politics. I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to vote. I'm sure it'll work out. And I think the more that we've disconnected from staying as informed republic and then not voted and not cared, and more people, I see this on Facebook all the time. People be like, I don't talk about politics. Politics is bad. People talk about politics is stupid. I'm like, dude, don't shame people who want to get involved, who want to get educated and care. That's actually the problem. The people who don't care. Like, if we actually had that voting bloc, the other 50% in America that voted and cared, we would be able to come to a majority of probably reason or unreasonability. I mean, it could go either way, really, when you think about it. But at least we'd have like everybody in, I'm all for I wish I think it's Iceland or Greenland. Like, it's against the law if you don't vote. Like, you have to vote.
Too. My son lives in Australia, and they actually fine you if you don't vote. They take it off your tax returns or whatever. They add it to your income tax if you don't vote.
Good, because the thing that I hate is people who don't vote and then complain. I just want to punch them in the face, because I'm like, seriously? Like, if you didn't vote, I don't want to hear from you complaining. So anyway, what are some things that surprised you when you went through the book? Maybe that stuck out, or maybe will stick out to readers.
What surprised me? I think what surprised me was how hard the work is. That's one thing. Even in a tiny town like Haines, with the assembly meeting supposedly every 2 weeks, but then there was all these committee meetings in between. I mean, it was for volunteers, it was probably 20 hours a week sometimes of time spent in meetings in the evenings, at lunchtime, and then just our packets for each assembly meeting would be sometimes 150 pages.
Wow. And
there'd be all this stuff, like you'd look at sewer and water. They give you all the information to make the decisions, but I'd sit there poring over engineering drawings of a roll-on, roll-off freight dock, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I hope this is okay. it's like millions of dollars. Is it going to work? Well, this guy says it is, and that guy does. But then someone will come to the meeting and say, that's a bet. And you're like, is it? Oh, wait, is he right? Because we need to know. And, there's things like that. It's a tremendous amount of time commitment that people who are, in, at least at the local level, and I can only imagine how that is multiplied as you move up in county or state or federal government. So there's that. I think the other thing that surprised me, I mean, I guess I knew it, but it was really reinforced when I was on the assembly, is that our town really runs on our public employees. It's not really the assembly. I mean, we go in and out every 3 years or 6 years. Nobody's even served. No, I mean, I think maybe someone might serve 10 years, but then we have every year, we're giving little pins and prizes for employees that have been there 20 years, 30 years, at the library, at the sewer plant, at the fire department, public works. That stuff happens even when there's no manager, or even when the assembly is all fighting with each other. Like you say, I mean, the roads still get plowed, the lights still go on. Everything is rolling because people get up in the morning and go to work, and they work for the public, but they're often criticized or made fun of. They're just lazy, or they're not doing this or that, but they're running the town, and the decisions that they make are the ones that maybe ultimately might have a greater impact on people's lives than the politicians do.
Oh yeah, I mean, if the roads aren't, up here in Utah, I spent about 20 years ago. Man, if those roads aren't snowplowed, you're an unhappy camper. And it's even amazing to me sometimes on social media, people be like, we shouldn't pay the government taxes or something like that. And you're like, do you understand how the whole thing works? Like the system of the roads and the highways and the freeways, and maybe people are more entitled today or something. I don't know. Social media seems to be, before social media, people used to do angry stuff in their car. And there's this concept of psychology where when people are in their car, they kind of think they're in a special bubble, that they're not really in the world and they're masters of their own car. And I don't know, they can do whatever they want and scream at people and run people off the road. But then when they hang out with each other, they're fine. And that concept of psychology seems to be extended into social media, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's such a interesting thing because, I'm a grandma, and so I like Facebook to see my family, the grandkids, the old friends from college, that you reconnect with. It all seemed so wonderful when it first started, especially living in Alaska and having been born and raised on the East Coast. It was like a miracle, all of a sudden I'm seeing all this, and then it just all kind of went south. And now my kids aren't even on there anymore. Like, Mom, stay away from that. When they do Instagram or whatever. So now we're just all on a family thread on the phone. We send our pictures just to each other.
Yeah.
It's not out public anymore. And that's the same with a lot of my old friends. We're just communicating not on social media, but through texts and pictures and stuff like that, calling, talking to them. It's like there's been and now with all this election stuff coming, I mean, you go on social media and it's just, wow, there seems to be either screaming this way, screaming that way, or then there's always the people in the middle that are either saying, everybody be happy, and here's a funny picture of a dog, or I'm promoting this, so buy this or buy that. Yeah. And you're like, what am I doing here? But then for me as a writer, that's the way I connect with a lot of readers. And so I don't want to disconnect them because I see that people are lonely. And I don't mean lonely, but they yearn for that communication. And there's a lot of, especially I think grandparents, who that's how they see each other, and that's how they communicate with people like me. And so I want to be aware that there's some kindnesses that can happen there. But I wish in many ways it was never invented.
It's gotten pretty dark. We may wish it never was invented. I'm not sure what Twitter's going to do if Biden wins, because no one's going to go on Twitter for anything. I mean, it was almost dead before the election.
I haven't done the tweet thing. I have this account, but I don't do it. I think, I obviously I live in Alaska in a small town, so I like kind of being isolated. I'm old school. I listen to the radio. But at the same time, all of my work, everything I do completely depends on electronics. I mean, my editors are far away. Everything's emailed. Like you said, we make videos, we send them out. I mean, so there's this real dependency on it, especially for people like me who live in rural places in the middle of nowhere. I wouldn't have a career without being connected. I'm not, so important that I can write on longhand and mail it to somebody and they'll just publish it. But it's definitely a double-edged sword, and I'd like to see it used better for, I don't know, it seems to bring out the worst in people, like you say, instead of the best, and that's too bad.
And I think that's what readers can learn from your book, and hopefully they'll learn is that given this microcosm that of really what's happening at a national level, and how maybe we should be nicer to each other, maybe we should focus on the facts, not attack each other personally, and really get back to basics, maybe as a populace, as a governance of people being involved in politics, people that want to go into politics, giving exposure to that. A lot of that stuff people can learn from your book, et cetera, and maybe take it to heart. One last question I have for you. I noticed there's 2 typewriters in your office there. Do you normally write on the typewriter?
Oh, I wish. No, these are really cool. I think I have 5 or 6. There's some under the desk too. I actually started using a typewriter when I was on the assembly, because I was online so much, because a lot of the assembly packets are, electronic, and there was all this stuff, and there was a temptation then to fire off an email or a blog or something and say something that I might regret later. So when I'd get home from meetings, I just type away here, and then I had these notebooks and I put it in. And a lot of the book came out of those little journal entries.
Wow.
That never went anywhere, but I'd have notes, And then the other thing I did too, just to get my brain different, my creative brain and my assembly brain different. Like when I took notes on assembly packets and everything, I did it on the typewriter. And then I could bring the hard copies in, with the things that I wanted to say about different items on the agenda. I can't actually type. I'm a 2-finger back. And so I found it really fun. It was almost like playing the piano, going up and down and this typewriter, I got this junky one on eBay, and it didn't work, and I was frustrated with it, but I really liked it after I started looking up. And so then I Googled around, and I found a guy named Mr. Typewriter who's in Missouri, and he reconditions typewriters. And so he talked me into getting, this is a Olivetti Latera, and it was made in 1962. And it's a really nice little typewriter. And then he talked me into getting that one in the back, which is a 1941 Royal Quiet Deluxe. That's the same kind of typewriter that Hemingway used. And this is the same one that Cormac McCarthy used. Not the one he used, but the same type. So it makes me feel like I'm part of some sort of tradition. And it's really, really fun if you have, when my grandchildren come over, I can put them, that's why I have a bunch of them. I put them on the dining room table. And those kids, they'll spend hours writing little stories. They love typing and seeing it. And these are kids, that grew up in school with the iPads and everything electronic and everything flashing and bells and whistles. But get out the typewriters and we make little book. I mean, they love it. And so
that's fun.
I like it. I don't mind if they play with them. It's not like they're that's what they're for. So it's neat. And at Christmas, I write cards on them. I'd like to send people notes that I've typed on a typewriter. And I don't know. I play with them, but I like it.
I like them too. I mean, I grew up in that era. There's something about that typing a line and the zing of the return, smacking it and the zing, and it goes back. And I don't know. There's something. There's like it's like a reward at the end of the line. It goes
up and downhill. I mean, that's what I like too. Like we're so used to these flat little keyboards, or just you're scrolling. And it's definitely uphill and downhill to type.
So that's cool. That's very cool. So as we go out, Heather, anything more we need to know about you and your book before we leave?
No, I really appreciate having the time to talk with you. I appreciate people reading what I write and sharing it, and really, taking with all of my books. It's kind of, for those of you that are just meeting me, it might be kind of fun to start at the beginning and go through and see me go, wow, boom, wow.
Read all the books for the
my
curve.
first books, are like I'm in Hanes and I'm in my 20s and 30s, and now the kids that were in my earlier books are now parents of grandchildren that are older than my children were when I first started writing. So there's a progression, and you can kind of get a feel, I think, for the town and the people here and politics and life, which is all really mixed up.
There you go. And I suppose that's the metaphor of life, politics and life. What's the old saying? What's the guarantee in life? Death and taxes. So politics are definitely in there. So thanks for coming on the show. We certainly appreciate having you on. And give us your plugs one more time where people can find you on the interwebs.
HeatherLende.com, really easy. Instagram, I don't know what it's called. I think just Heather Lende. I'm on Facebook, Heather Lende. If you Google me, you can find out more than you'd ever want to know. Mm-hmm. And I'm also very easy to reach. If you ever get to Hanes, you just ask somebody and they can find me. But also the contact, I answer emails. And I'm happy to talk to any book clubs or whatever. I'm here, and Zoom makes it really easy nowadays. I don't have to go home to talk to you.
There you go. One final question, if you don't mind me throwing this in. Did anyone ever come to you after you left office and apologize to all the hateful things they said about you when you were in office on social media?
No.
Really?
Actually,
that's interesting.
But, that's also something I learned, in the book that I have to, and this is politics in life, you just have to learn to forgive the people who never asked for it. And that's the way to be walking in the world for me anyway. And I will say, I don't mean to imply that, they were mean and didn't apologize, but there are some things, and small towns in some ways, at least ours, is sort of like a family, little dysfunctional.
Yeah.
No, they might not come up and say they're sorry, but I had one guy that I knew signed the petition. It was particularly not nice to me. And then when my husband and I were moose hunting, we got our skiff stuck in the river, and he went out of his way to be so nice. It was beyond nice, helping us and pulling the boat out and getting us to town and calling the next day. Did everything work out? And he never said he was sorry about the way he treated me, but I guess I take those little moments. I'll take it if that's as close as an apology, as I'm going to get. And so I think there's been moments like that. People have purposely said nice things to me without mentioning any of the recall, and I'll take that as an apology.
Maybe that's the analogy for America. We're just a big dysfunctional family that, Canada sits around and goes, Jesus Christ, these people again. We're like the drunken brother of Canada. That's why I was telling my Canadian friends, I'm like, we're like your drunken problem brother. We're like the Bobby Carters and Bobby Clintons or whatever. I don't know. We're the problem child, and you guys just have to put up with us. You're just like, oh my, what a war if they started again now. And we're just like, America. Anyway, thanks for being on the show, guys. You can check out Heather you can get her books at any sort of bookstore. Her book is Of Bears and Ballots. Of is in the title, Of Bears and Ballots, an Alaskan adventure in small town politics. And you can check out some of her other books she has. Of course, you can get them on Amazon or other different places. Find the Good. If You Live Here, I Know Your Name. That's kind of an interesting book. It's got a big old moose on the front. Take Good Care of the Garden and Dogs. It's probably something I need to read. And check out our books and all that good stuff. And I think this is a good thing for us to give some insight and some reflection on politics. Thanks, Manis, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.